In this video, we're going to be taking a look at adding and subtracting decimals. Today's goal is to be able to add and subtract decimals through the thousandths place. Okay, and it's really important that whenever you add and subtract decimals, that you always line up the decimal. You do not line up the digits. You always make sure the decimal is lined up. So you want to write that down in your notes. Whenever you add and subtract decimals, the decimals must be lined up. So now we're going to take a look at a couple problems that focus in on adding decimals, and we're going to take a look at problems that focus on subtracting decimals. So the very first thing you always want to do is write down your problem. So now that I've written down my problem, you can see my decimal is lined up. Okay, all my place value is lined up, my decimal is lined up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add, we're going to really forget about the decimal except whenever we come to it. Okay, so we're going to add 3 and 6, that's going to give me 9. And then we're going to add 9 and 3, that's going to give me 12. We're going to put our 2 here. Then we'll carry our 1. Now we've come to the decimal. Whenever you add and subtract decimals, the decimal just drops. You don't do anything else other than just drop it down. And then you add the 1 and 1 plus 0 will give me 2. Okay, so it's important that even though we're dealing with decimals, 3 and 6 still gives me 9, 9 and 3 still gives me 12. The addition and subtraction, the algorithm does not change at all. The only thing that changes is that there's a decimal there and we're going to drop it down. So let's take a look at number 2, and I'm going to write this one out and I'll show you how I write it out. Okay, so I'm going to write number 2 out. So we have 12 and 1600ths. Remember that decimal point always represents the word and. Okay, it's represented by the word and. Now we have 8 and 568 thousandths. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make sure my decimal point is lined up. I'm not going to worry about my digits at all. So I'm going to put my 8 in the ones place because I know that's where it's at. I'm going to have my decimals and make sure they're lined up. I'm going to write 568 thousandths. Alright, then I'm going to add those two digits together. Now, with decimals, remember, if you add a 0 to the right side of the decimal at the very end, it does not change the value at all. This gets on my nerves a little bit whenever there's an empty spot, so what I can do is just simply add a 0 there. Alright, and it'll help us out whenever we're subtracting as well. Alright, so now we're going to add together. We're going to forget about the decimal. We'll just add normal numbers together, 0 and 8. Forget about the decimal until we get there. Gives me 8. 6 and 6 gives me 12. Put my 2 here. Carry the 1. Go to my tenths place now. 1 and 1 gives me 2 plus 5 will give me 7. Bring our decimal down. 2 and 8 gives me 10. Put my 0 there. Put my 0 here. There we go. And carry the 1. Now it's going to give me 20. So we have a total of 20 and 728 thousandths. So now we're going to do number 12 together. Okay, so once you get out your pencil and your math journal, even though this is horizontal, we're going to write this vertical. I always like to add and subtract vertically versus horizontally. Okay, so it's important to line up the decimal. So we're going to write 12 and 11 hundredths plus 0 is in the ones place, line up my decimal, 8 tenths. Alright, now we kind of squished I kind of squished my numbers a little bit there, so I'm just going to add a 0 right here in the hundredths place, so all my digits have this, all my numbers have the same amount of digits. Okay, remember 0 to the right at the end of the decimal point does not add any value. Okay, so we're going to start adding. 1 and 0 will give me 1. Okay, so 1 hundredth plus 0 hundredths gives me 1 hundredths. Okay, 1 tenth plus 8 tenths will give me 9 tenths. Whenever we come to our decimal, we're just going to simply drop it down with addition. 2 and 0 give me 2. And then finally 1 plus nothing will give me 1. Okay, for a total of 12 and 91 hundredths. So what I want you to do now is work on numbers 13 and 14 in your notes all by yourself. And when you're finished with numbers 13 and 14, you can press play and I'll have the answers for you. So I want you to pause the video now. Okay, so we have our two answers now. For number 13, we have 79 and 43 hundredths. And then finally for number 14, we have 27 and 8 tenths. Now we're going to move on to subtracting decimals. And I'm going to do the first two with you, and then we'll do one together. Then I'll have you do two all by yourself. So once again, the first key thing that you need to remember is you always need to line up the decimal. So the first thing I will do is write the problem down for you. Okay, so now we have 17 and 5 tenths minus 13 and 6 tenths. Okay, the first thing you'll want to do is forget about the decimal. We're just going to start subtracting. So you're trying to take 6 away from 5. You cannot do that. So we're going to have to borrow from our 6. I'm sorry, 7. Make that a 6. We'll bring the whole number over to the tenth place. Okay. So now we have 15 minus 6 is going to give us 9. Now we've come to our decimal. We're just dropping it straight down. We do not need to forget. Do not forget about that until you come to the decimal. Okay, so please drop it down. So 6 minus 3 gives us 3. 1 minus 1 gives us 0. We don't have to write anything there. So we have 3 and 9 tenths. Now if you forgot about the decimal, that would actually equal 39, which would not make sense because 17 minus 13 will not give you a number like 39. So make sure you always drop that decimal. So now number 2 is 23 and 8 tenths minus 12 and 62 hundredths. And I'm going to show you how I write this problem down. Once again, I'm lining up my decimal. Okay, so I have 23 and 8 tenths minus 12 and 62 hundredths. I put my decimal there. Okay. Now, whenever we have a problem set up like this, there's an empty space right here in my hundredths place. What you have to do is put a 0 right in here. Okay. Not only does that line the digits up nicely for us, but it also makes it so we can start subtracting. Okay, because you still need to take 2 away from 0. Okay, but before that it was 2 away from nothing. Okay, so we have our 0 there. You must do that. Now we're going to start subtracting. You cannot take 2 away from 0, so we're going to borrow from our tenths place, make that 8 into a 7, bring over the 1. Now we have 10 minus 2 is going to give me 8. 7 minus 6 is going to give me 1. I bring down my decimal. 3 minus 2 gives me 1, and 2 minus 1 gives me 1. For a total of 11 and 18 hundredths. So now we're going to do number 3 together. First of all, we'll write this problem out together. So we're going to write 9 and 65 hundredths out in our notes. Minus 3, remember we're lining up our decimal, and 931 thousandths. Okay, before we start subtracting, we just want to add a 0 right here in my thousandths place so we can subtract properly. Okay, so now that we have done that, we have our decimal lined up and everything, we can just start subtracting as if we're doing whole numbers. We don't need to worry about the decimal just yet until we come to it. Okay, so now we're going to take, we cannot take 1 away from 0, so we're going to change that 5 into a 4. We're going to change that 0 now into a 10. So now we have 10 minus 1 gives me 9. We have 4 minus 3 is going to give me 1. We cannot take 9 away from 6, so we're going to change that 6. I'm sorry, we have to borrow. We're going to change that 9 into an 8. There we go. I'm going to carry that 1 over to my 6 now. So now we're in the tenths place. We have 16 tenths minus 9 tenths is going to give me 7 tenths. Put my decimal here now that I've come to it, and we have 8 minus 3 is 5, for a total of 5 and 719 thousandths. Okay, now what I want you to do is numbers 4, 6, and 7 all by yourself. I understand we skipped number 5, but do just numbers 4, 6, and 7 all by yourself. You're going to need to write this down in your math journal and complete it. And when you're finished with it, you can press play and I'll have the answers for you. So I want you to pause the video now. Okay, so the answer for number 4 is 69 and 33 hundredths. The answer for number 2 is 2 and 9 tenths. And finally, the answer for number 6 is 2 and 9 tenths. And finally, the answer for number 7 is 5 and 22 hundredths. So this is how you add and subtract decimals. If you have any questions about these two topics, I would suggest you rewind the video, watch some parts of it over, and also along with that, I want you to come and see me. Okay, so this concludes our video on adding and subtracting decimals.